Alrighty, good evening, afternoon, morning, whenever you're watching this, Dr. Luckin. This is my final project. I'm presenting it on my laptop and recording on my phone, so I'm also going to attach these PowerPoint slides in case you can't really see them super well. But we'll go ahead and jump into it. So I had 3 articles for this one. My first one is Orienting Attention to Auditory and Visual Working Memory in Older Adults with Cochlear Implants. The second one is The Effect of Pitch, Rhythm, and Familiarity on Working Memory and Anxiety as measured by digit recall performance. And that third one is Musical Contingent Self-Worth moderates the association between music training and tonal working memory, and then APA citations are all next to them. The main theoretical question that all 3 of these share is, how does working memory function? Working memory is important for a variety of reasons, and working memory and memory recall are closely related. Working memory allows for many mental faculties used every day, such as problem solving and learning capabilities, and a functioning working memory is integral for everyday functioning. So yeah, we'll go ahead and jump into it. This first one is about cochlear implants. They were wondering, can older cochlear implant users use a visual cue to orient their attention to a visual auditory item held in working memory? They did this by using a delayed match to sample task with 2 groups, cochlear implant users and non-cochlear implant users, and they measured response time and accuracy with the visual and auditory cues over the course of 3 48 trial blocks. The data they collected was on the speed and accuracy of the audio and visual recall, and then this is their data display right here. It's a box plot. I would say that it's a pretty good data display. I realize you just can't see my screen all the way. Because it's a box plot, some people who may not be familiar with box plots might not be able to read it, but otherwise, if you have, it's good. And so I would say for this context, if you're reading research articles, you've probably seen box plots before, I would say it's pretty good. I had no trouble reading it. For my predictions, outcome, and critiques, I predicted that the cochlear implant users would experience more difficulty orienting attention to audio items than the non-cochlear implant users, but equal difficulty with the visual items, and then that cochlear implant users would be slower and more inaccurate recalling items from working memory than non-cochlear implant users. Authors predicted pretty much the exact same thing. The outcome in the first regard, we were wrong. So cochlear implant users were actually pretty equivalent in their ability to orient attention to audio items and the visual items as non-cochlear implant users. However, on the second one, we were right. They were slower and more inaccurate when matching items from working memory. For my changes or critiques, I would say that they should probably, if they were to do this again, divide it into 3 categories: non-cochlear implant users, long-term and then short-term cochlear implant users, like those who receive them in childhood versus those who receive them in older age, just to see if that impacted it a bit more. Was it satisfactory? I would definitely say so. Data aligns with their conclusions, and they do acknowledge any questions that I had coming up reading it, such as that one about dividing the 2. Whoop, I just skipped a slide. Alrighty. Article 2, they asked, what is the effect of pitch and rhythm on familiar and unfamiliar music on working memory and anxiety in memory recall via sequential digit recall performance? For this one, they tested pitch and rhythm of familiar and unfamiliar music and anxiety utilizing digit span tests on music majors and non-music majors. Regarding pitch, rhythm, and familiarity, and anxiety tests were distributed before, during, and after the procedure. For the data, they collected the averages of digit recall accuracy in the 6 different stimuli, and this graph right here represents that. I would say it's a pretty good data display. It's super easy to read, probably makes sense to somebody who's like never looked at a graph before in their whole life. However, it's a little difficult to read just because it's printed small and like it's all in black and white, but it was probably a constraint of publishing. So otherwise, I would say it's definitely pretty good. Predictions, outcome, and critiques. With familiar music characteristics, memory recall of the digits would increase while it would decrease with unfamiliar music characteristics, and this would be more profound for music majors than non-music majors. That's what I predicted. The author's predictions predicted that music majors would perform better in every single characteristic than non-music majors. So they were correct. Music majors did outperform non-music majors in all of the categories. However, I was wrong, especially in that first part of my prediction. The melody actually did not significantly impact information recall, and the rhythm strength and memory recall the most, actually, surprisingly. For my changes or critiques, I would definitely say that the sample population was pretty small. If I were to do this again, I would try to gather a larger sample population, although this may have been a constraint of like how many music majors can you really find, especially like a non-art school. And then also the anxiety portion had nothing to do with working memory and just seemed to overcomplicate the data a lot, and then it yielded no results. So I would just cut that completely. Was it satisfactory? Satisfactory. Definitely in regards to the working memory portion of it, definitely not in regards to the anxiety part of it. But if you cut that out, it's satisfactory as a working memory article, which is what I was looking at it for. So satisfactory for me and my purposes. My third one, they were asking, what is the relationship between music training and tonal working memory? They did this by first using self-report measures on demographics, music training, and personality, and then participants completed a tonal 2-back task and a visual 2-back task in which they either heard or saw something. 3 somethings later, they had to say if it matched, if that makes sense. I'm sorry. And then They collected their data. It was the relationship between music training scores and two-back tonal task scores, as well as their music self-confidence scores. Data display, I would say, is pretty unsatisfactory. It's super misleading. These two big bold lines here, which is what your attention is drawn to, actually has nothing to do with their data, but just the music self-confidence scoring, the MCSW. Their actual data is all these tiny little dots. So super misleading if you don't like take the time to look into it. Even I misunderstood it at first. So I wouldn't say it's a good data display. Predictions, outcome, and critiques. I predicted that those with higher musical training and self-worth would have higher accuracy on the tonal two-back task, but equal to those on the visual two-back task. The authors predicted the same as I did. Those with the higher musical confidence scores actually higher accuracy, but it wasn't statistically significantly higher accuracy. It was just a very slight correlation on the tonal two-back task, and then the visual two-back task was pretty much the same. So we were right, but it wasn't statistically significant enough for us to actually be right, if that makes sense. They don't utilize the data from the visual two-back task at all. That's one of my main critiques. And then the other critique that I had was that it was done during COVID-19, so it was all done online, which is good for questionnaires, not so good for something with auditory, because speakers, headphones, things like that have differences. So those pitches may not present themselves in the same way. If I were to redo this, I would definitely do it in a lab where all of them have the same exact speakers, things like that, to eliminate any possibility of those differences. And so that was my main concern in regarding whether it was satisfactory or not. I kind of concluded that it wasn't, simply because there were just too many confounding variables. If this was done in a lab setting, it would probably be satisfactory. And their data does align with their conclusions, but yeah. So convincing. I would say the article 1 and 2 were both convincing. Their data did in fact align with their conclusions, and it was focused on working memory. The third one, I wouldn't say that I find it convincing, just because there are so many of those confounding variables that could have potentially impacted the data. The most effective, I would definitely say, is Article 1, the cochlear implant one. Not only did their data align with their conclusions, but every single question I had popping up throughout it, they mentioned in their discussion portion. There wasn't anything that stood out to me as something that could have affected those results, really. So I would definitely say it is the most convincing out of all of them. And then in terms of how these articles have sort of changed my views on working memory, I would say that it just broadened my scope of view on working memory. I definitely never thought about how like your senses can impact working memory in such a way, and like losing, or I don't want to say gaining a sense, but like strengthening a sense, in the sense of like, you know, my hearing's been impacted, now I have a cochlear implant, or like I've received musical training and now my ears are more in tune with something like that, could possibly affect working memory. And so I just found that really interesting. Thank you. That's all I have. Thank you so much.